broadcast is live. Welcome everyone to the first talk of the initiative called Endless Possibilities Talks for Interpreters and Translators Worldwide. Today we have the very first of the talks with Madam Interpreter, as you will know her on Twitter, Elizabeth M. Navarro-Hall in California. And in the hangout with us, we have from left to right, I'm on the left-hand corner here, and just to my left is Clara Galbensu. Clara, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us what you do, a little bit about your job, your location, please.
Well, hello to everyone. I work as a conference interpreter. I've been working for 20 years, and I work as a staff conference interpreter for an international organization which is based in different countries, and I work in Spain, in the city of Zaragoza, which is located in the north of Spain. And I mainly work in the field of agriculture, fisheries, and the environment. And then this is my main job. I also blog. I have a blog that I created some 3 years ago.
Right, you have one of the first. I'm sorry, you have one of the first European blogs on interpreting, by the way, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, I opened it like three and a half years ago, and I enjoyed blogging and I enjoy interpreting. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, and welcome, Clara. Thanks for joining us. Next, we have Elizabeth Tiselius coming to us from Brussels today. And welcome, Elizabeth. And please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Tiselius. I work in Brussels. I'm a Brussels-based conference interpreter, also a certified public service interpreter. I am busy right now writing a PhD on development of expertise in interpreting, and I do that at the University of Bergen in Norway. I took my interpreting degree in 1996, and I've been an active interpreter since then.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. And I understand you also do some distance learning in interpreting work. Is that correct?
That's true. I teach my students at the University of Bergen via a distance learning platform. Not as interactive as this one, I would say, but still very interesting and a very nice way to teach students.
Thank you. I correct myself. I believe I meant to say distance teaching. Thank you, Elizabeth. And next, Madam Interpreter herself, Esther. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please. I will be making a longer introduction when we finish this round, but since we're going left to right, please let us know about you, a little bit about you, and why you're here.
Okay. Yes, I will let you do the longer introduction later, Al, but I'm Esther Navarro-Hall. I'm originally from Mexico. I reside in California now, and I'm a practicing freelance conference interpreter, and I also do medical interpreting and court interpreting, and I am certified to do both. I'm a federally certified court interpreter as well, and I also teach. I teach at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. I am an adjunct professor there, and I'm teaching conference interpreting this particular semester, advanced simultaneous interpreting, and also simultaneous interpreting for court situations. So I guess I'll tell you more about myself in a little bit. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Esther. Thank you. By the way, Esther is also one of the trio with Gerda and myself who's been working on this initiative, and a little bit more about the initiative itself in just a couple of minutes. Next, we have Gerda coming to us from New Jersey. Go ahead, Gerda, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gerda Prato Espejo. better known as Gerda Bilingual. And I am a court interpreter in the United States. And I am right now in New Jersey, like Al said. And I am thrilled to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerda. Next, we have Michelle Hoff. We have her image will be the one showing due to some technical difficulties with the video or the webcam. But welcome, Michelle. Very glad you could make it. I know we'll be able to hear you.
Okay.
So
Hi,
please
Al.
go right
Hi,
ahead.
everybody.
Welcome.
Thanks. Just so you know, when we're finished the intros, I'm going to really quickly try and get into the Hangout with my other computer, which does have the webcam that's working. So we'll do that just quickly after the intros. But anyway, I'm Michelle Hoff. I'm a freelance conference interpreter. I've been working for the European institutions for the past 11 years, and I also work on the private market. I live in Spain. Well, geographically, it's Africa, but politically, it's Spain on the Canary Islands. I teach conference interpreting in La Laguna. There's a master's in conference interpreting there, and I've been teaching there for 11 years as well. I'm originally from Canada, but like I said, I live in Spain, and I've left Canada many, many years ago now, so that's a bit of a distant past. Some of you may know me as Interp Diaries. That's my main Twitter handle. I also tweet for AIB Intérpretes. That's the company that I work with. It's a group of AIC interpreters based in Barcelona. And I also do some tweeting for AIC Online, because I am a member of AIC and have been since 2004, I think. And I also run the blog, The Interpreter Diaries, something I've been doing for about 8 or 9 months now, and which is getting more funner every day. And I'm very pleased to be here with all of you as well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Thank you,
good.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Phew.
But we can't hear. I can't hear. Oh.
Right.
You can't hear me?
Okay.
I was no, I
Oh,
could
yeah,
not.
yeah.
I
Oh,
had
phew.
my mic muted. My apologies, and then it was
Sorry.
kind of stuck. Please go ahead, Michelle, and switch computers, and
Okay.
when you come back in, we'll be able to see you then. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, while we wait for Michelle to come back, what I'd like to do is read Esther's blurb on basically her BIOS. It is truly impressive, and we are so pleased that you could join us today, Esther.
Thank you.
I will read this so that I can get it all right, and it goes as follows. Esther Navarro-Hall holds a Master of Arts in Conference Interpretation from the Monterrey Institute of International Studies. She also holds Federal Court Certification, which is the highest certifying agency in the United States in terms of court certification. We have a couple of different levels of certification in the country, one at the state level and one is the federal, which allows the interpreter to work in any court in the country. She's also certified. She holds a California certification as a court and medical interpreter. A truly unique combination because both are highly specialized. Esther has also received a U.S. State Department and ATA English to Spanish certification. She has provided training for many interpreters, translators, interpreter trainers, and medical and courthouse personnel as well. Esther has worked as a freelance interpreter in the conference, corporate, court, and medical community fields for the past almost 27 years. It will be 27 years in May of 2012. She is an adjunct professor at the Monterrey Institute of International Studies, a graduate school of the Middlebury College, where she teaches conference interpreting, English to Spanish, and French to Spanish, and also court interpreting, English to Spanish. Welcome, Esther, and it's a real privilege to not only have you here, but also be part of this entire initiative. What I would like to do is turn the floor over to you for you and ask you to please share your journey, how you came about reaching a decision point where you said, okay, this is where I've been. I'd like to maybe look into interpreting. What does it require? What you did to get to where you are, and maybe a little glimpse into the future. Floor is yours, Esther. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much for your introduction, Al. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the hard work that Gerda and you have been putting into this initiative as well. I'm sure that people don't realize everything it takes. It's been months in the making and months in the planning, and this is our first formal talk, although we have had quite a few hangouts with each other already, informal ones, and I hope we'll have many more. Well, when we first started talking about doing a formal hangout for our Endless Possibilities initiative, we were trying to decide what the topic should be, and Al and Gerda, being as kind as they are, said, well, why don't you, how about you being the first guest for the more formal hangout? And I am not one to talk much about myself, so I didn't really know what the topic should be. And I asked him, I said, well, what would you want me to talk about? Some aspect about conference interpreting skills, perhaps, or court interpreting testing, anything that has to do with teaching or with my professional practice. And they said, no, we'd be really interested in hearing about your journey and hearing about how it is that you got to where you're at, how you got started, some of the challenges that you faced along the way. And I thought, oh boy, who'd be interested in that? But I started thinking about it, and I realized that none of us are born knowing. All of us had to start somewhere, and I figured that I would share my story with you. And not because it's any more special than anyone else's or more interesting than anyone else's, but because I strongly believe that we all have a story to tell. And I hope that this is the first of many, and we are planning to have many more guests in the future. So hopefully this is the start of a great thing for all of us professional interpreters and translators worldwide. So here it goes. I was raised in a 3-person family in Mexico, in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico. And no one in my family spoke any other language other than Spanish. Or so I thought, until my father started taking us to trips down south to meet the rest of his family. And I realized that some of the strange sounds that I heard coming from them and different sort of language that I was used to hearing was in fact either Otomí or Nahuatl, which are 2 indigenous languages in Mexico. And I knew nothing about other languages, knew nothing about interpreting, and I wish now that at that age I had known a little bit about it, because I would have applied myself to learning those indigenous languages, which later on would have come very handy in my career, especially in this part of the United States, in California and some of the southwestern states as well. Now, because I didn't learn those languages, I have to do relay interpreting and work with 2 interpreters instead of 1. But anyway, I knew nothing of any other languages. Once in a while, because we lived in the in a northern state that bordered with the U.S., when we lived in a city called Juarez in northern Mexico, I would hear English once in a while, and to me it was a very strange language. I didn't identify with it at all. We would have once in a while shows on TV. We'd be flipping through different channels, and oh, there was an American show. But I would much rather have it dubbed or hear it dubbed and hear the movies dubbed, because to me, trying to figure out what they were saying in English was a lot of work. And so no English whatsoever. I also didn't understand Americans, even though we are a country that borders the United States. And to me, they simply were fair-skinned people with blonde hair and blue eyes, very different from the people in Mexico. And they moved their mouth in funny ways to produce these sounds that I didn't understand at all. And so it was a very different part of my life because I wasn't exposed to it at all, except maybe a little bit on the radio and TV and that sort of thing. Fortunately, I had a very unconventional family. My parents, my father, Benito, rest in peace, didn't have much of an education. He only had a 6th grade education. And my mother, back then at that time, only had a 5th grade education. So it was very unusual in my family to hear of anyone wanting to study anything or learn any other languages or be exposed to anything other than what my parents had exposed us to in travels within our own country. Fortunately also, my parents were, they placed a high value on education even though they didn't go very far in school themselves. So they had the foresight at the time to enroll me in piano lessons. And because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed doing at the time, I hung on to music for dear life. And music became my life, in fact. So I kept studying piano. And the only other thing that really held my attention were books. And I read books like they were going out of style, in Spanish, of course. But the books that were my favorite all the time were the ones that talked about faraway lands and adventures and that sort of thing, particularly anything that had to do with very exotic places and that sort of thing. So after, when it came time to go to college, my brother Alejandro and my sister Marta are younger than I am. So I was the first one who needed to make a decision about what to do with my life after high school when I was getting ready to go to college. And back then, in that area of Mexico, there were a lot of nonprofit organizations that helped young Mexican kids get scholarships to study English and to go abroad. And so I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to learn a little bit of English. And the only condition was that I had to go across the border every day, back and forth. And I was learning English from books. But unfortunately, most of the kids who were studying those English lessons with me were native Spanish speakers. And we found it so hard that we really couldn't practice with each other. We learned a little bit of grammar and some phrases, but it was a very passive knowledge of English. So finally, I thought, well, how am I going to expose myself to learning English and to practicing with other people? And the first times that I came into contact with groups of Americans were actually through a summer job that I had. I was working at a pottery shop. And I remember that my boss told me one summer that there was one man at the pottery shop who was able to speak 2 languages. And he was the only person who was allowed to speak to the tourists because he spoke 2 languages. So I thought, oh, I better pay close attention to this man and see how he pronounces words and see what I can learn from him. And so I was observing him very carefully, and this lady, she came up and asked him about the price of this piece of art, this pottery work. And I was listening very carefully to the pronunciation, and he said to her the price was, he said in a very thick accent, "This is 33 for you, señorita." And I thought, oh, okay, I guess that's the way you say it. And she came back and was trying to haggle with him, and she said to him, "Oh, $33, why is that so expensive?" And he said again in a very thick accent, $33 for you, señorita. And I thought, wow, that is very interesting. How is it that they can sound so different from each other and yet understand each other? And I thought maybe English allows for a lot of different types of pronunciations and different accents and everything. And I thought, this is really what I want to do. I think that I want to try to figure this mystery out. So I marched into my parents' bedroom and I announced that I wanted to learn another language and that I was going to go to the United States and go to college there. And of course, they were just flabbergasted. They had a fit. They said, go to the United States on your own? Are you kidding? And I got all kinds of advice from all members of my family and friends. And why would you want to go there? And there are perfectly wonderful universities in Mexico. Why would you expose yourself to that? You're going to become an American. They're going to turn you into one of them. You'll get lost and your parents will never hear from you again, et cetera, et cetera. So it was quite an adventure, but again, through one of those nonprofit organizations, I was able to get a scholarship and went to a faraway land indeed. I went to Texas, to the state of Texas. And I went to a college in the state of Texas called Georgetown University. It's 30 miles north of Austin. Unfortunately, I didn't pick very well because it was college where there were only 2 of us who were of Mexican origin, one other young man and myself, and learning English was quite an ordeal. I never thought that the language was going to be so hard. I was completely isolated. My best friend was my dictionary. I slept with the dictionary. I couldn't speak to anyone. I was frustrated, completely frustrated. I didn't realize that book knowledge is not the same as practical knowledge and being able to speak the language. So there were times when I just ran into my room crying in frustration and left conversations in the middle because I would repeat things 4, 5, 6 times and no one would understand what I was saying. So anyway, I thought, I think this was the wrong move. I just hung on to music for dear life, and I thought, well, I guess I'll try to make a living by being a concert pianist. And so I marched into the practice rooms every single day, and little did I know that there were people who were geniuses at music, who were able to play piano and violin and cello and a couple of other instruments perfectly well and sang like angels on top of everything. So I thought, I think if I go through with this career, I'm going to starve to death by being a concert pianist. So I was getting pretty desperate. I didn't know what I was going to do with my college life. I thought maybe it's time I go back to Mexico and perhaps become an archaeologist. There's plenty of work there, especially in southern Mexico. And then one day when I was able to get myself out of my isolation in my room, I went by this area they call the Student Union. And I saw a couple of very interesting things. They had some advertisements at the Student Union, and one of them was about students being interested in someone tutoring them in Spanish. And I thought, oh wow, there's people who want to learn Spanish and I can actually make a living out of this. So I became a tutor in Spanish, and luckily I didn't have to speak much English for that because it was mainly a conversation tutor. And the other announcement that I saw at the same place was written in this language that seemed to me a lot more familiar than English, and it was an announcement from the French club asking people to join them and to sign up for French lessons. And I thought, oh boy, you know, something that looks like the type of grammar that I can actually understand. I didn't know much about the pronunciation of French back then, but the grammar seemed easy enough. So I started taking French lessons as well. And that's how I ended up in Paris. I ended up studying abroad. And curiously enough, when I was in France, I had an easier time living in France than my English-speaking classmates did, which to me was fascinating. I thought, oh wow, they don't think I'm an American, so I guess, you know, they have an easier time dealing with me, or I don't know what it was. But when I was in France, I also realized that the more I helped my classmates with the French grammar and the intricacies of the French language, the more I could practice English and the better I was getting at it. So rather than give up and decide that I was going to stay in France forever or go back to Mexico, I came back to the U.S. with a renewed sense of I think I need to tackle this language, and I think I need to do something about practicing it and learning it any way I can. So I was determined, and I got very creative about learning English, mainly through music, through TV, through songs, and little by little it got easier. It took me quite a while to get the pronunciation down. I still have a hard time with it, and I struggle with it in many respects. But then it came time to leave college, and what am I going to do with these languages? By then, I had also bumped into the students in the German club who convinced me to take German lessons. And there I was, fascinated with Goethe and Kafka and trying to work with French and German literature. But at the end of that journey in college, I was still stuck with what am I going to do with this. Obviously, music wasn't going to work out. I wasn't going to go back to Mexico to study archaeology. And what could I do with this literature? So again, I marched into the office, the career office, and I started looking at all the possibilities. I knew that I wanted to go forward with my studies and perhaps work at a master's degree. So I applied to all the Ivy League schools I could. I had good grades at the time, and lo and behold, I got this announcement for this Monterey Institute of International Studies in California. And besides that one, also a Middlebury school, which to me would have been a way of perhaps adding another language or studying abroad somewhere. But my final decision happened because California was the place that was closest to Mexico. And I had put my parents through enough of an ordeal being here in this country, and my family was a family of very modest means. If it weren't for the fact that my tuition and my living in a dorm was paid by this organization, I don't know what I would have done, because education in this country is so expensive. So anyway, off to California I went, knowing nothing about interpreting, just figuring that it sounded good. I remember my father one time talking to me about La Malinche, or Malintzin, or Doña Marina, as she's known in Mexico, an indigenous interpreter who was the interpreter for Hernán Cortés. And that was the only thing I really know about interpreting. But I remember my father saying that even though he didn't speak another language, he loved music so much that he started imitating Italian sounds to be able to sing opera. And he started imitating English sounds as well to be able to once in a while go across the border and take us shopping, or for us to get to know the U.S. a little bit. And I was really inspired by that. And he told me one time that he said he thought that a human being was worth so much when they spoke one language that he figured if somebody spoke two languages, that person would be worth twice as much to herself and to other people, and that really stuck with me. So I decided that I was going to pursue this language thing, and that I was going to go to the Monterey Institute, and the rest is history. When I got to the Institute, again, the training was quite grueling. It was the most difficult training I have ever gone through in my life. But when we came into the booth for the first time to do simultaneous interpreting, I was hooked. You know, that was it. To me, there's something absolutely magical about doing simultaneous interpreting and consecutive interpreting. It's a sort of alchemy of language, and I've been fascinated about it ever since. I am very passionate about it. I have been practicing. I actually count my professional interpreting career from 1985 when I graduated from the Monterey Institute. That's why I say that I've been at it for 27 years. And other than that, everything has been practicing interpreting. And a few years later, once I had enough experience under my belt, then I started teaching, and I haven't stopped since. I'm very passionate about it, and I hope to be able to help other people out in their journeys as well. So that's pretty much it for my story. I have a lot of other tales to tell about the different kinds of interpreting and everything, but I think I'll wait for questions for that.
Fascinating, Esther. Thank you very, very much.
You're quite welcome.
Indeed, fascinating. I have, let me see, a couple of pages of questions, but I know that others are quite anxious to ask you some questions as well.
Wonderful.
I'd like to remind everyone that we are recording and streaming, and the stream is going everywhere. Anybody with access to the stream can comment or can ask questions from the stream anywhere that you see the streaming hangout. And occasionally even my dog may bark, and what I'll do is I'll mute my microphone at that point. And I hope that you folks don't mind in case he even jumps onto my lap. In that case, I would probably just mute the webcam as well. I believe, let's see, we can probably start left to right. I know that Clara probably has some questions to ask of you, Esther. And go ahead, Clara, at this point, unless anybody has any other questions. I'd like to open up the question and answer session.
Okay.
Go ahead, Clara.
Well, I'm fascinated. Hi. Fascinating with your story. Fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, you answer many of the questions I have in mind. But I should like to ask you again about this transition from literature into court interpreting and medical interpreting. What were the main challenges you face in changing from Flaubert to court interpreting? Because it's a big change.
It is a very it's a big jump, and for court interpreting, for medical interpreting, and for conference interpreting, it's like apples and oranges. It's completely different. I find that the French literature and German literature, and at the point I also had a minor in Spanish, which was of course very, very easy to do, but it's something that has informed my practice quite a bit from the beginning. As you well know, Clara, having general knowledge and a good background as far as the classics and as far as all the reading is just absolutely essential for conference interpreting, for court interpreting, and for medical interpreting, in the sense that something always comes up in interpreting that has to do with literature, with poetry, with references about mythology, and the more well-rounded you are as a person, I think the better interpreter you are. I believe, I'm not sure if it's your blog that I have read this in, or your Twitter profile, and I remember seeing that you're a very curious person. And I am a very curious person at all, and I think and I think that is an absolute essential component for being an interpreter. You have to be almost have to have the detective part of it in your blood. You have to do a lot of research. You have to be constantly preparing. You never know where anything is going to come up from. I remember, for example, I'm not a very good cook. I have to confess. And I remember one time I was working at a trial in court interpreting, where the gentleman was describing some of what he did, and he happened to work in agriculture, and he was naming all these different vegetables and herbs that he harvested, that sort of thing. And I went completely blank about the word for basil, which is albahaca, of course, in Spanish. I know it well, but since I'm not a very good cook, I didn't have it at the tip of my tongue. And the most embarrassing part was that the judge was Spanish-speaking. And he leaned over and he said, Madam Interpreter, is the word you're looking for albahaca? And oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. But you know, you never know where any of this is going to come from. So whether it's literature or mythology or cooking or whatever, the better rounded you are, the better it is for your practice. And I think we're probably one of the few professions that has to know a little bit about everything. It's just amazing. So yeah, it was a big transition in the subject matter, but it always helps to have that background knowledge. So I'm very glad that I studied literature.
Excellent, Esther.
And in court interpreting, sorry, Al. Yeah.
No. You had the floor. Go ahead, Clara.
No, I don't want to ask many questions, but I am curious about court interpreting because I've never done this before. Well, never done it. And have you faced any difficult situation in court, or because
quite a few, yes. I often tell my students that medical interpreting is the type of interpreting that is for your heart, and court interpreting appears to be more for your brain. You have to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of skill to be able to go into different registers and that sort of thing. But the hardest part about court interpreting is not so much the linguistic part of it, even though it's extremely challenging for anyone, but the fact that you get to see the worst and the best of humanity in court. It is quite difficult. There's a lot of what we call a vicarious trauma, that you have to get rid of after you are in court. Interestingly enough, though, one of the things that has kept me going in the profession has been court interpreting, probably because of the such a direct contact that you have with people. You see that people's lives are made or broken hanging on a word, that you say, and it's very immediate. And the sentencing of someone is very immediate. You see all kinds of things from child molestation to rape to domestic violence to child abuse, all kinds of things that are very difficult to deal with at a human level. And on top of everything, you have to be in top form to be able to perform your job. I remember one instance, though, when I was, I think it was my first year, actually, of practicing court interpreting, that it was one of the episodes or one of the things that really kept me going in court interpreting in spite of all the difficulties and the human drama. And it was a case in family court. About this little tiny girl who had been separated from her mother because they were having all kinds of difficulties through her divorce and that sort of thing. And she had been separated from her mother for a whole year. And she was a tiny little girl, maybe about 5 or 6 years old. And we were all there in court, the adults with the usual bureaucracy, the attorneys and the judge and the social workers, etc. And all of a sudden you hear this little voice from the background. This tiny little girl wanted to say something. And the judge doesn't usually allow it because they try not to put children on the stand. But he allowed it this time, and he said it was going to be off the record, but he wanted to hear what the little girl had to say. And so they put her up on the witness stand, and she was, tiny. She was sitting on her hands, and her little legs were swinging back and forth because she couldn't quite reach the floor. And we were all expecting her to say something about what had happened in her case or anything like that. And she turned to the judge and she said in this tiny little voice that I had to interpret, she got closer to the mic and it got really loud, and she said in Spanish, I'd like to thank the man in the black dress for giving me back my mommy. And oh my God, there was not a dry eye in the house. Everybody, including the judge, was crying, and just to hear the effect of the little girl's words spoken in my language and me having to repeat them in her language, having to put myself in her position, in the position of a 5-year-old little girl who hadn't seen her mother in a whole year, and her innocence, calling the judge the man in the black dress and everything. It was just really touching, and it was one of the things that has kept me going even in spite of the difficult situation.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you,
Esther.
You're quite welcome.
Do you have any more questions, Clara, that you would like to ask of Esther?
Well, I have many questions, but I
Probably
leave
have a
my colleague.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. I can relate a little bit to you, Esther. I have not done any medical interpreting other than responding to an emergency call from police officers who were helping a crash victim. And my initial reaction was, look, I do not know the medical terminology. You really need to find a specialist in the medical field who knows all of the ins and outs. They said, no, we need someone who can let us know what the person's name is. This case was a man. One of the cases was a man, very badly mangled. He had been rushed to the emergency room. I was able to get there within 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes. As I was walking in, they were rushing him into the MRI, and I was able to help. So that is such a highly specialized field, though, that anything more than that, I really would have to excuse myself and say, we need a specialist, but I'll be glad to assist in any other way. So, yes, thank you very much. The skill required for both of those, but especially the medical, I think is truly amazing, and it can be astonishing how effective the help of a medical interpreter can be under the right circumstances.
It is
Very,
definitely, Al. And I think that a big part of it is the vulnerability that people feel when they're ill, or if there's a terminal illness or facing death, or having their loved ones be in that situation. I didn't think at first that I could do the medical interpreting part of it because it's so real. I've had, for example, to interpret in surgery procedures and be there in the operating room when people are awake while they're doing surgery on them. And I remember the first time I saw somebody bleeding from their eyes, it was quite impressive, and I thought, uh-oh, I don't know if this is for me. Right. But I think that your need to help and your need to feel compassion for people and do the best you can with the skill that you have. I might not have any other skills such as cooking or dancing or any of these other things, but I do have, I believe, a skill in languages, and why not use it to the best extent possible? I
yes.
think I'd be remiss if I didn't do that. I mean, what right would I have not to help people?
Yes, I think anyone in this group would be, and that's what we try to do. Very good point. I'd like to invite Elizabeth to ask questions of Esther. If you would please, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 questions prepared for you, Esther. I'll start with my second one because I think it links on to what you just said. I found your story very fascinating, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And I would like to ask you, you teach. So obviously you train future generations of interpreters. And what would you say from what's the most important piece of knowledge or experience from your own background or from your interpreting that you would like to pass on to your students? What's really important for them to have in order to be good, compassionate, professional interpreters?
Yes, of course. Just like Gladys' question, that is a very wonderful question. Not one that can be answered very quickly because I have so many things I want to pass on to my students and so many things that I learned from them as well. But I would say that one of the main things, if I can distill it a little bit in the practice of interpreting, which I believe would help them be better interpreters and at the same time have better people skills and that sort of thing, is it all boils down to no judgment. It has a lot to do with not being judgmental of other people and not expecting people to be judgmental of you as well. Our profession, translation as well as interpreting, I had a translation agency for 10 years as well, besides doing the interpreting, and everything hinges so much on being right or wrong most of the time, on picking the right word, on being in the right situation, on using the right format, the right protocol, etc., that we don't need to put any more pressure on ourselves while we're learning that. My students, a lot of times, one of the main concerns that they have is what do they do with the butterflies in their stomach? What do they do with the nervousness they feel when they go in the booth? What do they do when, in spite of preparing themselves for a whole week, they still feel that they're not good enough? And I think it has a lot to do with that perfectionism that all of us have as interpreters, as well as that, I would call it almost like a schizophrenia, of us having to split ourselves into different people. So judgment, I think getting rid of judgment towards other people and towards yourself is something that really helps. We're all learning. I mean, what is the best and the worst thing that can happen? I've been at this almost 27 years, and every conference I go to is a new challenge, and I never know what I'm going to bump into. Also, when I go into a classroom, I feel so energized by my students and so updated by them. But at the same time, I feel very vulnerable every time that I teach. And I think that a good dose of humbleness is always really helpful. We need to sometimes bring ourselves a couple of pegs down. We go into these high-stress situations, and we forget, that we all started from scratch, from zero, and that every day is a new day. So that judgment and that flexibility and that resilience, I think, would be the best things that I could pass on to my students.
Yeah, thank you. That was, I'm encouraged to hear. That's also something I share that I would like to pass on to my students, especially the thing that you shouldn't judge, yes. Which is important, because you don't know the background, neither from, maybe you don't even know your own background, and not
Absolutely.
To say the least about other people. I was surprised because I was assuming about your background that you were bilingual and grew up bilingually. I mean, we are bilingual now, obviously, but I was assuming that you also grew up bilingually.
Oh,
but you didn't. You grew up monolingually. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, because this is my own experience as well. But I was curious to know, because you also teach again, and from the students that you have, do you have the impression that today most interpreters in the U.S. are monolingual, are brought up monolingually and learning languages in adolescence, or more or less, or are they brought up bilingually? And does it change? Does it change the way you learn to interpret?
I would say, Elizabeth, that in the U.S. it's about half and half. I say that there are a lot of people who are interested in learning languages who start actually around college age, and they go to another country and they have an experience abroad, and they decide that they've fallen in love with the language and the culture, and they take it from there. So they learn as adults or as young adults. But then we also have a very large component of people who are born and raised in the U.S. who are from other backgrounds, from other Spanish, or their parents are from Spanish-speaking countries. In our academic circles, we call them heritage speakers, even though I don't enjoy the term as much, because sometimes it has a negative connotation of people who are not quite bilingual and that sort of thing. I'd rather call them something like bicultural speakers or something like that. But it does make a difference as far as the language skills. Of course, the people who are born and raised here in the U.S. and learn it at home or through their parents, the second language, or through school sometimes, have a different context to work from. And it has a lot to do with how the culture informs that, the different registers, the different idiomatic expressions. It's more of a linguistic thing. And the people who learn it from scratch, I think, would be closer to the situation that I was in, where you learn the rules first and then you move on to greater knowledge of the language. And a lot of times you actually learn your language better in the process. So they pose different challenges, and we have a combination of both when we teach at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, and we could go on forever about the methodology and the pedagogy of all this. But
don't go into that.
Yeah, but
thank you for giving me the term Thank you for giving me the term bicultural speaker. I like that. I'll keep it.
You're quite welcome. I've thought a lot about it, and it's one of my pet peeves. So thank you.
Great. Elizabeth, did you have another question, or I believe you mentioned two?
Yeah, no, I'm done there. Thank you so much. And thank you
Okay.
for answering
You're
so honestly,
quite welcome.
Esther.
Great.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I will skip Gerda for now,
Oh, no.
and we will go, no, for now, just for now.
Okay.
And we go straight to the Canary Islands in Tenerife. Michelle, welcome back.
Hi,
So glad you
Michelle.
could make it with your webcam. Please, I know you have questions for Esther. Please go right ahead. Cannot hear you. Your audio is muted,
Oh, sorry,
Michelle.
we can't hear you, Michelle.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, perfectly now.
Sorry.
Yes.
I had the microphone up because I had sort of visitors at some point and didn't want
Oh, no
to
worries.
distract anybody.
Great.
Anyway, I was just saying that I found your story extremely interesting,
Thank you.
Esther.
Thank you.
I also really liked the questions from Clara and Elizabeth,
Absolutely.
and your answers as well. It really is food for thought. I almost want to rewind this and listen to it all again to make sure I can grasp everything that's been covered in just such a short time. But I do have a couple of questions of my own as well. A couple that I had sort of prepared in advance, and another one which I'd like to ask you first, if you don't mind, that just occurred to me as I was listening to your story. It has to do with your musical background, because it seems that you actually have considerable musical skills. Obviously, not everybody who plays the piano considers becoming a concert pianist.
That's right.
And and I wonder if you have ever sat down and thought at any point about what link you might see between your music skills and your language skills, or the learning of music and the learning of languages.
Yes, definitely. I have thought a lot about it, and I am sure there have been studies that have been done about this. I consider music another language altogether, just like math. My sister is a physicist, so she has also talked to me a lot about math and the different language that they use as scientists. And I think that it has aided me greatly in my study of languages. For example, in that story that I was telling you about, where I could, from the beginning, tell the difference in accent between both people. And I think that yes, a highly developed ear for music and tone and pitch and that sort of thing really helps. It helps with accents. It helps with being able to perceive parts of a sentence or a speech that other people might not be able to catch. When I interpret, like most of my colleagues, or like a lot of my colleagues do, I tend to take one of my earphones off from my headset so that I can hear myself speaking and I can really monitor my production. And I think that that also has a lot to do with the music part of it, because when you're auditioning or when you're practicing, one of the great things that they really drill into you is how you have to be aware of your production, and you get a lot of feedback on that as well. So I think it's not only the auditory part of it, it's also the training. It's developing that ear. It's, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. I mean, which one came first, your musical ability and your ability for languages, or the other way around? It's a little bit hard to say sometimes. But I think that even up to this point in my life and in my career, is still something that really helps and that really informs my practice. The other part of it that I find very interesting is that we could also talk about this for a long time, but it's what I call the intangibles of interpreting. And one of the greater intangibles of interpreting that I have run into is being to develop an observer. Someone inside you, or someone who is almost like watching you interpret from the top. What I would call the macro part of interpreting as opposed to the micro part of interpreting. And it's something that, because of my musical training, I developed at an early age, being able to have that observer within me and being able to pass that on to my students as well. You are always having to, you always have to monitor your production constantly and be very aware of what you're saying and be able to think in two channels at the same time. So I think, yeah, music, to make a long story short, has helped quite a bit. Thank you, Michelle.
That is an extremely insightful answer. I can tell you have done some thinking about this, and that's very nice. Just a quick follow-up question: do you still play? Do you still play the piano or any other instrument, or do you find you just don't have any time for anything anymore?
I do it privately sometimes, not as much as my husband would want me to. My husband David wishes that I could play more often, but I unfortunately not enough time. I studied classical music for 16 years. And I really thought that I was going to make a career out of it, but it fell by the wayside a little bit. I think I might pick it up at a later stage in my life.
Well, that sort of ties in nicely with my second question, because you say you don't have any time to play music. You probably don't have a time for lots of things. How do you manage to find the time to both work and teach? I mean, this is a bit of a vested interest here, because I know that a lot of teachers who are also practicing interpreters find it really hard to balance the two. And I just wonder what you would have to say about that, about how you experience that.
Yes, it is an extremely difficult juggling act every single day. There are times when I don't see my husband a lot. There are times when I don't get too many hours of sleep. Since we were talking really honestly here, I have to say that that is one of the greatest challenges. You really hit the nail right on the head. Balance is a very difficult thing for me. I find that I have to invest more time in my health than I am investing, for example. I find that I have to perhaps accept less assignments and do a little bit less traveling. Some of the other things that I have to keep really present so that I don't forget about them are, other things such as family, such as disconnecting from all this technology once in a while. I was talking to one of my Italian colleagues recently, and I was telling her that I do need a sort of cleanse once in a while, and I try to take one day a week off any kind of screen, iPhone, iPad, computer, television, etc., because it really absorbs you. I mean, if the day had 36 hours, I would use every single one of them. And the other part of it, I think, is that that's another one of the I guess qualities that you really do have to have as an interpreter. You have to find a balance. Not only to be able to get rid of some of those things that we were talking about in medical interpreting and court interpreting, but for conference interpreting, you really do need a break in between. Otherwise, you just keep going and going and going, assignment after assignment, and it can get pretty tough mentally, very challenging. So it's a very difficult thing to do, and if I do have to err on the side of caution, I would rather teach less courses, Michelle, than overload myself with that, because I give a lot to my teaching, and if anything is going to suffer, I'd rather have the work suffer a little more than taking less assignments and that sort of thing than my teaching. So that's why I'm only doing, for example, 2 courses all in one day on Wednesdays this semester, because it just really does take so much, and there's so much to do and so much to be updated on that if I have to chop off some assignments here and there, I'd rather do that. Also, my practice, my personal freelance practice, it really comes to bear on my teaching and vice versa. And I have to really watch that. I have had many opportunities to become a full-time professor, for example, or to start up a company that specializes only in online training and that sort of thing. There's many requests for that, but I'd rather keep that down a little bit and be able to do a better job than the other way around. So,
I think I'll just say something here, and I'll see if you agree. My feeling is that if there were 3 Esther Navarro-Halls in the world, probably all 3 of them would be busy full-time. Is that right?
You're absolutely right, yes. You know me well, my dear, yes.
Yeah, well.
I suspect that you have a little bit of that going on yourself, right?
Yeah, maybe. Might be.
Okay.
Thanks very much. That's
You're
very
quite
interesting.
welcome.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Very, very good questions. If I may, Flor from the stream, she's been watching, Flor in Buenos Aires, and she has the following question. Fascinating, she says, and she'd like to know what was the worst or most embarrassing situation in an interpreting job.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Always
I got plenty of those, but
right.
I'll tell you one of my most recent ones. It was actually a consecutive interpreting situation, and this happened at the end of last year, actually. I had to interpret for a company who was bringing in all these guests. This was a bit of corporate interpreting with some political interpreting thrown in. So it was a conference interpreting situation, and of course I had to go up to the stage area to do my interpreting, and everybody was rushing, setting up, etc. And the big deal was that I was going to interpret for a senator in the state of California, who was the special guest of this company, which shall remain unnamed. And I needed to get up there with my pad, and I had my pen just in case. We've all been talking about the smart pen, but I had a bit of a wardrobe malfunction, I guess you could say. I was wearing I like wearing scarves a lot because it protects my throat, when we do a lot of interpreting. And I had this fancy brand new silk scarf that I had bought for my outfit, and I had just closed my briefcase after retrieving my pad and my markers and all this other stuff, and my scarf got caught in the zipper of my briefcase, and I had it tied around my neck in such a way that it would have taken me much longer to try to untie it than to take my briefcase with me. So I took my briefcase with me with my scarf stuck in the zipper, firmly stuck in the zipper, and my pad and my marker and everything else, and I had to do consecutive with my briefcase in my hand, so it was very awkward, and it didn't look nice, and I think that they were filming it as well, so it was quite embarrassing. I was turning all colors and sweating profusely and all that, but I made it. I was able to concentrate. But, oh yeah, I have all kinds of interesting stories. Another one, if I can share one more with you, I was interpreting for a witness on the witness stand, and this lady was becoming very emotional about what had happened to her daughter. She had been abused for many years by her husband, and during the latest episode, he had beaten her severely and had been dragging her through the house by her hair. And the mother was trying to describe how she was trying to get her daughter away from this monster, and she was very emotional, and she was crying, and she was acting out what had happened. And she decided that she was going to act it out on me, so she started pulling on my hair, when she was talking about what was happening to her daughter. And if it hadn't been for how funny it was that she was pulling on my hair and didn't realize that she was doing that on the witness stand, it would have been a really tough situation because of what had happened to her daughter. But of course I had to do the typical, Your Honor, may the interpreter request that the witness not pull on her hair or something like that. But it was quite embarrassing and very painful as well.
Right. It had to be stated just like that, so that everybody knew that it was coming from the interpreter and not a statement by the witness, for sure.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
That's right.
Excellent. Very, very good. I think Flor, let me see if she has, no, I just told her that I would ask the question. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to listen to those two stories.
Good.
And,
hi, Flor.
Yes, very good. We are coming up close. In fact, we may be a little bit over 1 hour at this point. And does anybody have another question? I'd like to ask Clara, did you have another question you would like to
No.
ask of Esther, please? No?
No,
Not
it's okay. No.
okay, very good. Then, Esther, I would like to adopt for this series, borrow, steal, whatever we might want to call it, an idea that came from the Actor Studio. And that is to close off this session by asking you the 10 questions that James Lipton always asked of his guests on the Actor Studio. And
yes.
it is, yes, it is the 10 questions asked by Bernard Pivot, which is basically based on the Proust questionnaire. And the questions, Gerda, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Al. Before
Yes,
you ask
Gerda,
your questions,
you'd like to make, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention some of the comments that we have from our audience today. That was my job today, everybody, just to be vigilant of our stream. And Ilenia Goffredo said, thank you for sharing your story, Esther. And Esther Ermidia, she shares your name. She said, thank you, Esther, from your tocaya. Maybe
Yeah.
Madam Interpreter can interpret that word for us.
Your namesake
Excellent,
go.
is
thank
the
you.
closest
Yes.
I would come to. Yes.
By the way, welcome to Esther. She just joined in the last 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, coming from Facebook, one of the interpreter groups on Facebook. And we'd like to welcome Esther Ermida, I believe is her last name. And we look forward to working with the two Esthers in the future. Thank you very much.
Hi, Esther.
And thank you, Gerda. Anything else at this point, Gerda?
Sure. Olga Matos also indicated that she had goosebumps at your story.
Oh,
She thanks you very much.
Touching. Thank you so much. Thank you, Olga. Hi.
Thank you for relaying the questions and the comments from the stream, Gerda.
Thank you, Gerda.
Very good, Esther. Unless there are any more questions, I'd like to proceed with the 10 questions
Okay.
from Esther. They're very simple, very straightforward, but they might reveal quite a bit about the soul and the essence of Esther Navarro-Hall.
Okay.
I'd like to know, what is your favorite word?
And this is in English, of course, right? Is that
Yes, if we could say everything in English, please, because, well, in fact, you might utter it in another language, but if you would please interpret it in English.
Yes, I'll say it in English. My favorite word would be passion.
Great. What is your least favorite word?
Pettiness.
What turns you on?
My husband's love.
There's a great one. What turns you off?
Violence.
What sound or noise do you love?
Well, that's an easy one. Children's laughter.
Wonderful. We have 7 little girls.
Oh, how nice.
Granddaughters, I should say.
Oh,
What
that's
sound
sweet.
or noise do you hate?
You know, the worst sound I have ever heard, I think, in my life, Al, is the wail of a mother who has just lost her child. That saddens me. Yes.
Yes. What is your favorite cuss word?
I don't cuss in my day-to-day life, but I do interpret curses, and I don't mind doing that, especially in court interpreting. I would say in that case, my favorite curse word to interpret is the equivalent of the F word in Spanish, or I would say in Mexican-oriented Spanish. It starts with a CH. I'd rather not say it here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we don't have to utter it here either. What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
I can think of two. I like to be an archaeologist or a painter.
A painter. Do you
Yes.
paint at all today?
I don't paint at all. I would love to learn how to paint. I happen to be a very visual person as well as a very auditory person, so I absolutely love art.
Great. My mother started painting when she was in her 70s.
Oh my gosh, wow, inspiring.
Great.
I
Yes.
might try it yet.
Excellent. What profession would you not like to do?
I don't think I don't think I would like to work in a factory, Al. Repetitive, that thing of doing one thing over and over again. I don't think I could handle that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just not for me.
Right. And the last one, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
What took you so long?
Okay. Excellent, excellent, Esther.
You're
That is
welcome.
great. I think it shows a lot of who you are and what life means to you, and also what you may have given of your own life to share with others.
Thank you,
Your
Al.
story has been a lovely one. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And I'd like to thank Clara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clara. It has been great to see you, to meet you, and to have you participating in this get-together.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, Clara.
No,
Yes.
no, no. I say it is my pleasure to be here with all these nice friends.
Great.
Thank you,
you.
Clara.
And Elizabeth, it was great of you to join us and to have you be part of this first talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michelle in Tenerife, thanks for coming, and we look forward to seeing a lot more of you, and I know that that camera will be working very well next time. You figured it out.
I figured it
Great.
out. I figured it out. Thank you
That's
very
great.
much, Al and Gerda and Esther as well for inviting me. This has been really very interesting for me.
You're quite
we
welcome. Thank you.
look forward to a lot more. And Gerda, thank you for all your help in the chat within the Hangout and for relaying the questions and keeping me straight and keeping everybody posted on the happenings. Thanks so much. By the way, I'd like to say, Gerda's laptop died last night.
Oh,
She had been
I
struggling with
know.
it. It sounded like she had a very small motorcycle within her laptop for the last several weeks. It finally died, and now we have to plan a funeral. Maybe we can do it as part of another hangout. So
Can I
Gerda,
just
thank
say,
you so
Al,
much.
thank you. Al, thank you to you too for moderating this so well, and for taking all of your
Absolutely.
time to do
Yes,
all the
thank you.
tutorials, for putting it up, and thanks a lot.
Oh,
Hey,
it's a
oh,
great.
Thumbs up for Al.
Yay!
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you very much, ladies. I applaud all of you for
Thank you
participating
so
in
much.
this. And
I
I'd
also
love
wanted to
to.
thank everyone for that, opportunity to participate and for being among such lovely people. It's a thrilling experience, and I hope we have many more like this. I really appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much, and lots of
Thank you,
kisses for
Esther.
everyone.
Thank you. And I have one special request. Is everybody up to staying up a few more minutes? Because what I'd like to do is go ahead and end this broadcast and then invite everyone to another very short one for a debriefing. Is that possible for everyone?
Depends on
I
the
can
state.
stay.
I'm sorry?
Now, yeah, of course. Yeah, now.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
if at all possible. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And thank you again, Esther, from the bottom of our hearts.
Oh, you're
I'll
quite
go
welcome.
ahead.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and end this one and launch another one.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.